Hi everyone, this is Sharan. Welcome to my channel. Today in this session we are going to see about a summary, crosstab as well as pivot functionalities in Pandas library. So before going into the details, as usual, let's see why these functionalities are required and why it is important for us to learn. So if you consider any sample data set while working on a use case, so if you maybe consider this example, so let's say we have a customer ID, we have the gender, salary, as well as we have age and their expenses. So let's say we want to understand this particular data better. So for that matter, like whatever data set that you are going to work on, so you want to understand those data sets much more better. So then maybe you should be asking few questions about the data set. For example, something like this. So you should be asking questions like what's the average age? So in this case, what's the average age of a particular customer? What is the average salary of that particular customer? Or is there any pattern between the gender, age, as well as the expenses? So in order to analyze or in order to get answers for these questions, we need to make use of the functions like crosstabulation as well as pivot. So we are going to see how to implement all these in like using Pandas library. And before going into the tutorial, the fact for today is about population. So it is in 8000 BC, it is estimated that the human population is around 5 million. And after 4000 years, the population increased by 2 million, from 5 million to 7 million. Whereas nowadays, the population increases by 2 million once in every 9 days. I thought that was interesting. So before going into the tutorial, like if you like what I'm doing here, please give a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more data science related content. And please stay with me in this journey of learning data science in 100 days. Let's go into the tutorial. In today's tutorial, we are going to see how to implement a summary, crosstabulation, as well as pivot functionalities that is available as part of Pandas library. And let's go into the tutorial. So first, as usual, we need to import Pandas library. So what I'm going to do is, in order to understand the data much more better, so I'm going to use an inbuilt data set. So this is the data that I'm going to use for today. So earlier, like I was trying to use something from Cadle, but it had like too many rows and maybe not good for an tutorial session. So I have come up with a customized data for easier understandability. So let's read this data and then see how it is. So let me just print this data set and then show you how it is looking like. So this is the data that we are going to work on today. So it has gender, age, and the job title, salary, the rating, as well as the company size. So we are going to do some analysis on this particular data set. So we are going to use basically summary, crosstabulation, and pivot for our analysis. So crosstabulation as well as pivot are like very similar to each other. We will also go through their key differences between both of them towards the end. Stay tuned. Okay, so now we have read the sample data. So let's see how a summary function would work. So job underscore data is the data frame that we are going to work on today. And we want to understand more about an attribute, let's say age. So age is a column in this particular data frame. So we want to understand more about like what's happening like for age. So let's say we want to understand the distribution of age, like what's the range, what's the minimum value, maximum value, what is the values of various percentiles. So in order to answer all those questions, we can simply use .describe. So what it will do is it will provide us a summary of the attribute that we are looking for. So here it clearly says that there are totally about 13 records and the mean value for age is 31.53. The standard deviation is which can be considered as a fluctuation within the dataset is 6.25, and the minimum age is 25. The 25th percentile value is 25. 50th percentile is 30, and so on. So it says that this is the data of type float and whatnot. So this describe functionality provides us a template inside about a particular attribute. So let's say we are only interested in the mean, like we don't want like so much details. So by executing this, what it does is in this particular data frame, this particular column, which is age, when we say mean, so it calculates the mean for that particular column in this data frame. So if you see here, it's similar to what we have already captured. And so let's say when we are working especially on a string or character data sets, and we want to understand the patterns or how many unit values are present. So in this case, in our data set, we have a job title. So let's say how many distinctive job titles are present in the data set. So what we can do is we can use .unit. So this will provide us all the unit values for that particular attribute or the column that we are looking for. So here in this case, the three unit values are data analyst, data engineer, as well as data scientist. So these are the job titles that are found in our data set. So if we want to understand how many occurrences are there for each of those values, we can use val counts. So this will provide us the details about the number of occurrences. So this clearly says us that there are about 5 data scientists in the data set and 4 data engineers and 4 data analysts. And let's say if we want to do a specific analysis on a specific type, for example, we saw how describe works. So the describe functionality would work differently when we pass on an integer or float value, whereas when we pass on string or character value. So let's see, like we want to understand about what's the pattern for only the objects or only the columns that are of that are not of a integer or like not of a numeric data type. So that are mostly of maybe string and so on. So when I execute this, what happens is it says that the column gender as well as job title are of type object, and so this is what their pattern is. So there are about 13 records. There are 2 unit values in gender and 3 unit values in job title. So the top is basically based on sorting them. So so this is what the values are, and the frequency of the values, like which is their top occurring, which is like basically after sorting. So that's about how to use describe on the columns of particular data type. Moving on to the next one, if we want to find a summary of the whole data set, we can just mention the data frame on which we are doing the analysis, and .describe will provide us the summary of all the data present in that particular data frame. So here you can see by default when you use summary, the most of the columns are of type integer or float, and hence we are able to get the summary of only those attributes, whereas we don't get any details about the attributes such as the gender or the job title. So let's say if we want to include all of them and get an overall summary, so by executing this, we can get all the attributes, like attributes that are specific for string or object type, as well as attributes that are specific to an numeric type of column. So here it gives us, it includes us all those attributes that is part of the describe functionality, and for each of those columns, whatever values are applicable, only those values would be getting populated. For example, if you see gender, so since it is string, only the top 4 attributes are applicable, so we have values for them, and everything else is not a number. So similarly for all the other attributes too. So that's how describe is useful. So basically describe functionality would provide us a very good summary about the data set that we are going to work on. So whatever be the data science, like whatever be the problem that you are going to work on, so the first step is, after once reading the data set, maybe quickly do and describe, execute the describe to get a summary of what the data that you are going to work on. What is the general distribution? Is there any outliers? Like you should be able to get most of the details by looking at this particular piece of information. So this would be really helpful in whatever work that you are going to do. So next, moving on to the crosstabulation. So crosstabulation is specifically useful when we want to check is there any pattern or is there any relationship between 2 or more attributes. So let's see if there is any relationship between rating as well as gender. So by executing this, so what basically happens is it says that it shows us the distribution of the data between gender as well as between the rating. So this helps us to clearly understand is there any particular gender concentrated with a particular rating, or like how is the distribution if we just consider these two parameters at a time. So is there is it males or of always getting certain rating, or like is there females or getting certain rating? Like in order to do those analysis, this piece of code would help us in understanding the relationship between those attributes. And so this can be represented in multiple ways. So we can represent the columns within the square brackets, or we can also use dot representation. So this is basically exactly the same thing, but here we are using dot. So here what we are doing is we are comparing the ratings that is being given with the size of the company, like number of employees in that particular company, to understand how the ratings or how the patterns behind the ratings between companies of different sizes. And let's say we want to do a transpose. So transpose is mostly used if we want to change the look of the data, like change how the data is being represented. So we can use transpose. Basically what it would do is it will just it will just transpose the data, like the rows into columns and change columns into rows, and pretty much brings up the same values. So if you see here, so this is exactly same as this one. So here we had a rating as rows, but now ratings has changed into columns, and we have gender as rows. So depending upon like which type of representation is better for you, you can transpose accordingly. So let's say we want to get a percentage. So so here we were getting the count of employees between these two categories. Let's say between two specific categories we want to get the percentage of maybe employees. So then what we can do is we can use lambda function in order to calculate the percentages. So here what happens is, so each of these values are a percentage in terms of the total population. So if you add up all these percentages, it should be equal to 100. So this gives us like a representation about where the concentration is heavily on. So looking at the raw numbers might not give us an idea, but looking at the percentages, it clearly shows us that a majority of the population is into these two criteria, in these two categories. So these functionalities would help us in better understanding the data. So now moving on to the pivot functionality. So when I execute pivot, what you can see is that it is exactly same as what is being done in crosstabulation. So the output is we pick up like the attributes that we want to analyze, and pretty much the output shows us like what's happening. So here in this case what we are doing is we are saying that we want to compare gender as well as rating, and we want to aggregate on the column salary, and the aggregation that we want to do is mean. So here what happens is for gender and rating, the salary, so here the values that you find here is aggregated value. So this helps us in understanding how or what is the pattern for salary based on gender as well as rating. So these functionalities or these would help us in better understanding the data set. So this is we are using job title as an index, and we are making the comparison based on gender as well as rating, and the aggregation is mean. So what we are doing is so since we are using mean, and gender is not an float or an integer, so we can see a lot of not a number. So let's say if I replace this with salary. So in case of salary, there are like lots of missing values, so which also would be represented as not a number. So various combinations of for these combination, for example, rating 7 and data analyst, there isn't enough data. So whenever there is no data, like it comes up as not a number. So maybe you can make use of all these functionalities to maybe to understand the data better, which is really important in any data science problem. So before proceeding into like the model building or into into any particular analysis, it's always best for you to do these basic analysis to get a feel of what you are working on and what's the high level patterns that are coming up in the data set. So that's it for today. So like as I mentioned, between cross-tabulation and pivot, so they are like very similar to each other. Pretty much like you can use cross-tabulation to do the analysis based on multiple attributes, and you can do the aggregation. So here in some cases we were just doing the count. You can do, of course, you can do the aggregation, but the one main difference is pivot expects the data to be in data frame format, while when you use crosstab, it can also be simply an array. So all it needs is all those multiple attributes, so you can pass them as an array as well, and it will still work. Whereas if you use pivot table, then the data set needs to be in data frame format. So if you actually see this source code, that what happens is in cross-tabulation, so whatever data that you pass as an input, it will be first converted into a data frame, and the pivot table function would be indirectly called in there. So if your data set is already in the data frame format, then maybe directly go for pivot table to do the analysis. Whereas if your data set is not in data frame format, then it makes sense to use cross-tabulation. So I hope this has provided you some insights about how these functionalities of Pandas library would work and how it has been helpful. So here are some of the maybe workout examples that you can try at home. So these of course help you in better understanding the problem, and maybe you can try to re-execute the whole script based on the data set that is available here. So this is an cattle data set about customers. Yeah, I think that's it for today. So if you have learned something new today, please give a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for similar contents. And if you think this could be helpful for someone who's trying to learn data science, please share it with them. I hope you have learned something new. Thanks. Bye for now. See you on the next session.